Hello everybody, it's Glass Half Dead here, and today I want to talk about the Games Workshop X-Wing Killer, Aeronautica Imperialis. Yes, I did almost call it Adeptus Titanicus, but it's Aeronautica Imperialis. And okay, so I have probably titled. Let's just answer the question of: is this better than X-Wing? Is this actually going to topple X-Wing from the throne of whatever the game X-Wing throne is? No, is the answer. I'm just going to get that out there straight away. I don't think it has the same mass appeal as X-Wing. It's not going to beat X-Wing. However, if you are into Warhammer, is this going to be good for you? Could this be, as some people want it to be, Warhammer X-Wing? But just to be clear, I'm not going to go over the kind of in-depth rules. This isn't going to be a battle report. This is going to be me talking about my experience of both X-Wing and Aeronautica Imperialis, the limited first impressions that I've had of it, and just kind of saying how I feel the two compare, because the comparison has to be made, doesn't it? The comparison has to be made, and we have to discuss it. Is it good? Is it better? Is it worse? How does it compare to X-Wing? I'm going to get the negatives out of the way first, because the negatives are actually pretty minor, and they have nothing to do with the gameplay. The negatives are for the two-player starter set. It's not. You don't really get what you need to play the game. You do. Don't get me wrong. You get the dice, you get the ships, you get the bases, you get the mat, you get the rulebook. But they've just made it so awkward if you actually want to just buy this single, two-box set and then have that as your board game. It's not the best. So the reason for this is because they leave out cards. When you are using your little ships here, you have, much like in X-Wing, you have a little ship card, which tells you all the stats of your ship, and gives you everything you need to know, like the throttle, the altitude levels, the max speed, the weapons, etc. And they don't give you that. They do. They're in the rulebook. It's actually really awkward, because when you're looking through the rulebook, you're going to need to know your ship's cards, and there are 4 different ships and 2 players, so you're going to have to swap the book back and forth, and then you are also almost certainly going to have to look up rules. So I was flicking through the book like a madman, always having to go back to the same 2 pages where the ship rules actually are. It's just, why? Also, the mat. As you can see the mat up here, it does look very nice, but this box is clearly designed to hit the board game market, which is a great idea, I think. And my only question is, why wouldn't they give you cardboard? I have no idea. Really strange decisions from Games Workshop there. They've taken these beautiful models, and they are beautiful models. They look so much better in person than I thought they would. Like when I saw the original reveal from Games Workshop, I had zero interest. Like none at all. Because I was like, the ships look generic. Who cares? I don't. Whatever. But when I saw them in person, really nice. Honestly, like they look really good. And that's it. That's the only negative. What they chose to package the 2-player box set with, which actually isn't bad. I'm a very negative person, and if those are the only negatives I have of the game, it's pretty good. Let's talk about some of the neutral things, or the positives. I guess you could call them positives. Before I compare it to X-Wing, why is this good? Why is this a good game? So I'm going to be talking very, very specifically to the Warhammer players here. The Games Workshop site very specifically called this game out as being the same scale as Adeptus Titanicus, which means, hypothetically, these models may one day be cross-play compatible with Adeptus Titanicus. That's very exciting. Now, I don't have Adeptus Titanicus. I didn't really have an interest in it. It looked too much for me. But for some reason, knowing that I might be able to add planes to Adeptus Titanicus has made me interested in Adeptus Titanicus. Right? Something I had zero interest in, and then something I had questionable interest in, makes me very interested in both. The mind's a crazy thing. And of course, with those two things ready to go, we could possibly see the expansion into Epic itself. Now, I'm aware that Adeptus Imperialis, Adeptus Titanicus, and Epic 40k were all separate games back when they were first released, but I really hope that Games Workshop doesn't miss a trick on this one and gives you all three systems to play, because it will do exactly what it did for me, which is it will make someone that has zero interest in Adeptus Titanicus buy Adeptus Titanicus. A lot of people want to play Epic, okay? And if you just make that the correct scale for Titanicus and Aeronautica, people are going to buy those even if they don't want the game that those models come with. It's painful how profitable that will be for them. Epic's a big draw. These two games less so, I would probably argue. But they can still push the miniatures. It worked on me. I reckon it will work on everybody else. Let's also talk about... Now, I don't know the rules for this, I've got to be honest. But we do know that ground targets are in the game. So there are rules to, drop bombs to the ground. That's fine. But what I'm more interested in is just the fact that you can have stationary models that are on the ground. And that's part of the game. I think that's really cool. Like, that is thematically really interesting. And obviously, I'm not even talking about leaning towards, that means we can have Adeptus Titanicus and Epic. Don't care about that for this. I just think it's a cool thing to have in the game thematically. I don't know how they play. Haven't done that yet, because I've only managed to play with the 2-player box game, not with the Rin's World expansion. Okay, now let's go to the full-on comparison between X-Wing. Where do we start with this? Okay, I think the best way to kind of sum it up is that this Aeronautica Imperialis is like fiddly, complex X-Wing. Okay? You still have arc dodging. So, you still have forward, side, and rear arcs. But you also have up and down, all simulated on the board. Obviously, you also have ground targets, but let's ignore that. And actually, looking at this sheet right here, which is now off the screen, the best way to think of that is each of those maneuvers. No. So that first one right there, level flight, okay? That is kind of like X-Wing. Take that one maneuver of it allows you to go forwards and change your facing to anywhere in the front 60 degrees of your plane, okay? Nice and simple. And there it is again, level flight. And you then set your speed on your dial, as you can see these dials here. Very easy to do, works well enough. And that is, in X-Wing terms, similar to taking a X-Wing template, movement template of 1, 2, or 3. So you kind of have those two options combined into a single thing, except it's all on hexes. Okay? Then you will notice that there are 7 other maneuvers that you can make still. That's pretty big, obviously. Now, one of them is very similar to a K-turn. So it's you go forwards and you turn around, and then that's easy. That makes sense. But there are also others where you're almost doing like a sloop. I can't remember what it's actually called. Is it an S-turn? But you take a sideways and then you turn back on yourself. And then there are lots of others that allow you to do multiple hex movements and turns all in one thing. It's a bit complicated. I will say that my first playthrough of this was worse than my first playthrough of X-Wing. And the reason for that is because trying to just mentally figure out how all of the maneuvers worked was quite challenging. In X-Wing, you just set a dial and you put the template down and, I crashed. Who cares? I've still made the move. The game continues. In this, it's more complex than that, because because it's all hex based, you can always pre-measure. You can always work out exactly where you will be before you make any sort of move, and you can sort out the speed you want to go and the verticality really, really easily, which is why I believe this game, Aeronautica Imperialis, out of the box, is worse than X-Wing. Even if you prefer a fiddly, more complex system, I don't think out of the box this is the way to go. However, let me tell you why. Let me tell you for why. The reason for that is because it is so possible to work out exactly how far you are going to move, whether or not you will crash into anything, whether or not you will stall out or whatever or tail spin from climbing too high or going too low. You will never fly off the board because you could just figure it out when you look at the board with the hexes. Equally, a big part of X-Wing is the risk and reward of specifically stress, the stress mechanic. You make a red maneuver, that means you're stressed, you get a penalty. That does not exist in this game. Now, I did mention, and again, I'm hoping that you're coming to this video knowing roughly the rules. So you do have the possibility of crashing. Like just in the middle of the board, you might just crash because you stalled, because you went over your maximum speed or under your minimum speed or over your maximum altitude, or went to 0 altitude, which would be the ground, and you crashed. That will never happen in a regular game. So essentially there is no negative to any maneuvers. Imagine playing X-Wing with no red maneuvers. That sucks. Here is where I believe that we need to apply a little bit of a home rule. I don't know, just a guess, to make the game force you to make errors. Now, this obviously isn't going to be interesting to everyone, but allow me to pitch you an idea. Chess clocks. Boom. Suddenly, you do not have time to work out everything you need to work out. Suddenly, you are at the possibility of going over your maximum speed or under your minimum speed. Suddenly, you aren't able to dodge arcs as easily as you were before, or able to get ships into your arcs as easily as you were before. I think that adding a chess clock, adding an element of timing to this game will elevate it so much that I would argue it would be better than X-Wing. I think it would be a faster game, and not just like in actual time. Like you could play this in a faster in a shorter amount of time than you could play X-Wing, but you could also, it would feel faster depending on the time you put on the clock. Obviously, you could make this game feel frantic if that's the game you want to play, and then you would really, really bring out the difference between a good pilot and a bad pilot, as people know their maneuvers and their ships, and that's when you would get the real element of being able to judge what your opponent is going to do, dodge their arcs, much like you get that in X-Wing much, much easier than you will get that in this. In this, I truly believe you have to add an element of time. You are trying to force a mistake, right? That's what you need to add, because without some sort of penalty, the game is a simulation game, whereas X-Wing is more an arcade game. And now, obviously, some people want the simulation game. I personally prefer the arcade game. Don't get me wrong. I still think the idea of a huge, 8x8 battlefield of this game sounds really fun. I think that would, and with no timers, that's just you play, you chat, you have an epic game. That does sound really fun. But I think that if you're looking to make this a competitive game, and I say that because obviously X-Wing is, then I really think the only addition you need to make to this is figuring out the best points level. I don't know what that is. I'm not even going to guess. And the best time for whatever. I don't know what's better if you want a time per phase or if you want a time per, or maybe you just want to time the movement. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know enough. As I've said, this is just first impressions. I'm guessing. And I think if the community kind of comes together and really puts some work into this game in regards to growing the scene, the tournament scene, this could be a serious competitor, if not in scale, then in sheer fun and enjoyment to X-Wing. So obviously I kind of rambled on for quite a while there. I'm just going to very quickly bring it back. I personally, my personal thoughts here are, I love the Star Wars universe, but only when it's like Jedis and Starship Troopers, Clone Troopers and Stormtroopers, and that's all awesome. And I like in the movies when they have the big space battles, but actually on the tabletop, seeing an X-Wing does nothing for me. Or a TIE fighter. Oh, just a quick note on scale. For those of you, I try to show it in these videos by showing my hand and it next to a dice. But these are significantly bigger than an X-Wing. So if you know an X-Wing, these are like double, maybe triple the length and bulk of an X-Wing. So they're quite meaty. They are bigger than I thought they would be. Anyway, back to my personal thoughts. However, I don't care about the space flight of Star Wars. Now, that's obviously super personal. Some people are going to love that. When I saw this, I love Warhammer. I thought they released the blandest looking 2 ships they could. Like, I don't even know, a Thunderbolt, which is generic Imperial Ship 1, and a Dackerjet in generic Orc Ship 2. And it's like, really? They could have gone with such interesting sculpts. Or, hell, made their new ones that really fit the scale and stand out from others. But they didn't. However, when I saw them up close, that was what convinced me to pre-order the game. It was me seeing the ships up close, saying, oh, well, actually, you know what, these are pretty cool. And I'm willing to drop the money for the starter set and a few of the extras. I don't have the extras yet, that's why I can't comment on them. Now, I also think that X-Wing is a great game. I think it's very competitive in the sense that anyone can pick it up and very quickly, I don't know if quickly is the right word, kind of pick up the basics. It has a very, very low skill floor, but then obviously a really high skill ceiling, and that's a great thing to have in a game. This, I would argue, has, I don't want to say significantly, but a higher skill floor, just because it's a little bit more intimidating to look at. There are no templates to help you, and I think the templates from X-Wing are great. This doesn't have that. I wish it did, because I love the template system, but having played on the Hex grid map, with all the different maneuvers, this actually is a much freer system than the templates. It has a much greater variety of end positions, and yeah, I genuinely think this will be a game that I play on a regular basis if there is a scene to play it, which you never know with Games Workshop. I'm not going to talk about the future of the game because I don't know anything about what they're going to release, what they aren't going to release. I doubt even Games Workshop knows. But final thought, I really enjoyed this game. I would recommend you buy it. I would also recommend that if you're not on the fence, Okay, no. If you're on the fence, you're not sure, but you got the cash, and you're like, well, you know what? Why not? Definitely. Or you're an average, or if for some reason you're a board gamer and you're on my channel, buy the 2-player starter box. It's great. If you kind of are leaning towards getting it and you just need that little push, I would actually recommend skip the starter box, because you're going to need to buy everything else regardless. It's weird, I know. Don't buy the starter box, but buy one of everything else, and you're good to go. There you go. Anyway, this has been Glass Half Dead. I'm really excited for Aeronautica Imperialis, and I really hope that someone somewhere near me actually tries to form a bit of a scene, and I'm, yeah. Hey, if you're in the London area and want to play some Aeronautica Imperialis, I'm going Imperials, hit me up. Anyway, this has been Glass Half Dead. I hope you've enjoyed my little first impressions of Aeronautica Imperialis here, and I've waffled on for far too long. This was meant to be a 10-minute video, I apologise, but I do hope that you've had a good day and continue to have a good day. Goodbye.